For 7 years, I sent my son-in-law thousands of dollars every year, believing I was helping my grandchild build a stable life after my daughter passed away. I never questioned it. I never doubted him. And honestly, I never imagined that the person I trusted most with my daughter's legacy might be hiding something from me. Then one afternoon, my grandchild pulled me aside and whispered something that made my stomach drop. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet sentence from a child who suddenly looked far too serious for their age. "Grandpa, something's wrong with Dad." At first, I didn't know what to say. When a child tells you something like that, your mind tries to protect itself. You assume they misunderstood something. Maybe they're upset. Maybe they're imagining things. Because the alternative, the idea that the person you've trusted for years might not be the person you think they are, that's a much harder thought to accept. Later that night, I replayed the day over and over in my head. What had he been hiding? Why had he gone to that place alone? I couldn't shake the feeling that every dollar I had sent him over the years might have been going somewhere I'd never intended. And then another thought hit me, the one that made my blood run colder than anything else. If I hadn't followed him that evening, I might never have discovered the first real sign of a secret that had been hiding in plain sight all along. The next morning, I started noticing other small oddities. Phone calls I used to get from him became rare. The excuses were endless. Details that didn't match up with the stories he told. And somewhere deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because once you start peeling back the layers of trust, the truth has a way of revealing itself, piece by piece, sometimes painfully slow, sometimes shocking enough to take your breath away. And I had no idea just how shocking what I was about to find would be. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope. Every morning, I watched him leave. Every evening, I tracked his return. Nothing could be left to chance. And the strangest part? The more I watched, the more I started noticing details I had never seen before. Small things like his carefully hidden receipts, the extra keys he carried, and the way he sometimes glanced nervously at the street corners, as if expecting someone to be watching him. One afternoon, I saw something that made my stomach twist. He met a man I didn't recognize, slipped him a small envelope, and then walked away without a word. The man disappeared into a nearby alley, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought it would give me away. I crouched behind a parked car, trying to catch every motion, every nuance, every sound. The faint hum of a distant traffic light, the click of his shoes against the pavement, even the rustle of leaves in the breeze, everything felt amplified as if the city itself was holding its breath with me. I wanted to confront him immediately, to demand answers. But I knew that would ruin everything. I had to see the whole picture first. Every instinct told me that patience would reveal more than rage ever could. And so I waited, following him, observing every tiny action, replaying each moment in my mind later that night over and over again. It wasn't just about curiosity anymore. I began to fear what I might discover. The fear settled deep in my chest, cold and unrelenting, the kind that keeps you awake and restless. For years, I had trusted him with my family's future. What if that trust had been misplaced? What if every dollar, every favor, every piece of care I had given had been fed into something I wasn't meant to see? Then one evening, the first unmistakable clue appeared. A set of documents he had left carelessly on the kitchen counter. Bills, letters, receipts, that didn't match the life he claimed to be living. I barely dared to breathe as I picked them up, scanning every detail. My heart raced. Each line I read confirmed something I had suspected for a while, but was too afraid to admit. My grandchild's father had been hiding more than just small secrets. And in that moment, I realized the investigation couldn't stop here. Every small observation, every strange gesture, every missed call had been leading to this. And I knew deep down that the next discovery, the one that would change everything, was just around the corner. The documents I found that evening were only the beginning. As I sifted through bills, letters, and receipts, a pattern began to emerge, one I hadn't expected. There were transactions that didn't make sense, names I didn't recognize, addresses that weren't our family's. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone who wasn't paying close attention. But I was paying attention now. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the papers, my hands trembling. My chest felt tight, my mind spinning. For a moment, I questioned myself. Was I reading too much into this? Could these really be mistakes? But the feeling in my gut was too strong. Something had been hidden from me, and now, finally, the veil was lifting. That night, I started retracing his steps again, more cautiously than ever. I noted the shops he visited, the streets he preferred, the little habits I had ignored before. And then I saw it. A house he went to repeatedly but never mentioned to anyone. It wasn't far from our neighborhood, but it was tucked away, almost invisible from the main road. My stomach sank. Why would he need a secret place? The following days, I watched him from a distance, keeping careful notes. Every movement seemed calculated, as if he knew someone might be watching but didn't expect me. And slowly, the terrifying truth began to reveal itself. He wasn't living a normal life. He was hiding something that, once discovered, would change everything I thought I knew about him, and about my family. I kept asking myself questions I didn't want answers to. How long had this been going on? Was my grandchild truly safe? Had I been supporting someone I shouldn't have trusted? And most importantly, what would happen if I finally confronted him with the truth? The fear was sharp, like a cold knife slicing through the comfort I had built around my family. Every instinct screamed to stop, to turn away, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But another part of me, the part that my grandchild had whispered to years ago, demanded that I continue, that I follow him, that I see the truth for myself. Because once you start uncovering a secret this big, there's no going back. And I had a sinking feeling that what I was about to witness next would make everything I had believed for 7 years seem like a lie, that I knew the moment had come to see the truth for myself. My grandchild's words, "Grandpa, something's wrong with Dad," were no longer whispers in my mind. They had grown into a heavy weight I could no longer ignore. That evening, I followed him again, keeping to the shadows, my heart hammering in my chest. Every step I took felt like walking on a tightrope. One wrong move and I'd be caught. He approached the house I had noted earlier, the one tucked away, almost invisible from the main road. He paused, checking the street as if expecting someone to be watching, then slipped inside. I crouched behind a fence, barely daring to breathe. The faint smell of the garden, the warm glow of lights through the curtains, the muffled sound of footsteps inside, it all amplified the suspense. And then I saw her. A woman I had never met, smiling as she greeted him. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But there she was, clearly at home, laughing like they shared a life I had no part in. And then the children. Children I hadn't known existed. My mind froze. My grandchild's father had another family. My chest tightened. A cold sweat ran down my spine. For years, I had been sending money, believing I was helping my own family survive. Every bill, every school fee, every check I had wired, it had been supporting a secret life that had nothing to do with the grandchild I loved. I crouched there for what felt like hours, every sound magnified. The click of a door, the soft murmur of voices, the faint scent of cooking drifting into the night. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And yet I couldn't look away. I had to know the extent of the deception. Questions raced through my mind, each sharper than the last. How long had this been going on? Were my grandchild's needs truly being met? Had my trust been exploited? And worst of all, what else had I been blind to all these years? By the time he left the house, I had seen enough to understand that nothing about him was as I had believed. And yet, the deeper truth, the one that would make my blood run even colder, was still just out of reach. Something told me the next time I followed him, the full reality would finally reveal itself. And that's exactly what I had to do. Because once a secret this big exists, ignoring it is no longer an option. And once discovered, it can change your family forever. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the images of the other house, the children, and the life I had never known existed. I kept replaying my grandchild's whisper, "Grandpa, something's wrong with Dad." It felt like a warning I had waited far too long to understand. The next evening, I decided to follow him again. My hands shook as I gripped my coat, every sound on the quiet street echoing in my ears. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of wet asphalt and fallen leaves. Every step felt dangerous. Every shadow seemed alive. He moved as usual, unaware of my presence. But this time, I noticed something I had missed before. He carried a small bag tightly clutched against him as if it contained something important or secret. I trailed him, heart hammering, praying he wouldn't notice me. He entered the hidden house again, but this time he lingered in the driveway longer than usual, checking the street corners as if he sensed someone might be watching. My chest tightened. I crouched behind a bush, barely daring to breathe. Every faint noise, a creaking door, a distant car horn, the rustle of leaves, made me flinch. I watched and waited for hours, taking notes in my mind, memorizing every detail. The way he walked, the timing of his trips, the people who came and went. And slowly, everything began to fit together, like pieces of a puzzle I had ignored for too long. The money I sent, the trust one gave, the family I had believed in, it all intersected here. Then a small but unmistakable clue appeared. Through the dim porch light, I saw a document peeking out of his bag, A letter, addressed to someone I didn't recognize, with sums and dates that didn't match anything he had told me. My stomach sank. Every dollar I had sent over the years had been supporting something I wasn't meant to know. For a moment, fear froze me in place. What if he caught me? What if I was wrong? But curiosity was stronger. I had to know the full story. I had to see where all of this led, and I had to understand the truth before it was too late. And in that moment I realized, the next step I took wouldn't just reveal secrets. It could change everything about my family forever. I couldn't ignore it any longer. Every suspicious action, every hidden envelope, every unexplained errand, it all pointed to one undeniable truth. I had to see proof with my own eyes. That evening I followed him more carefully than ever. The streets were quiet, the city lights dimmed into a muted glow, and the faint scent of wet concrete and evening air clung to me like a warning. My heartbeat felt deafening, and every small sound, a cat scuttling down the alley, the click of a distant door, made me flinch. He arrived at the hidden house, carrying his bag tightly, and entered without hesitation. I crouched behind the hedge, breath shallow, eyes straining to see anything I could. That's when I noticed it, a stack of documents, some spilling from the bag, clearly not meant for anyone else to see. Receipts, letters, and lists, all detailing transactions, secret addresses, and amounts I had sent, labeled in ways that made it obvious they weren't being used for my grandchild's needs. I felt my stomach twist. Every dollar I had trusted him with, every bit of support I had offered, had been funneled into something I wasn't supposed to know. My hands shook as I scribbled mental notes, heart hammering in my chest. The betrayal was more than financial. It was emotional, personal, and deep. I paused, thinking about my grandchild. Were they truly safe? Were they even aware of any of this? The thought made my chest tighten and my vision narrow. I realized that discovering this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting the family I still loved, the part of my daughter that lived on through my grandchild. Minutes passed like hours. Every sound felt like a threat. Then, as he left the house, I caught sight of a familiar name on one of the letters, a name I had never heard in connection with my family. My stomach dropped. The scale of the deception was larger than I had imagined. And at that moment, I knew one thing for certain. I could no longer sit on this knowledge. The confrontation was inevitable. I had to face him, and the truth I had uncovered would change everything. The day finally came when I couldn't wait any longer. Every nerve in my body was on edge. I had spent weeks gathering proof, memorizing patterns, and preparing myself mentally for what I might discover. Now I had to face him. I called him over, trying to keep my voice steady, though my hands trembled. When he arrived, he smiled, oblivious to the storm about to hit. I motioned for him to sit, and for a few moments silence hung heavily between us, the kind of silence that makes you acutely aware of every small sound. The hum of the street outside, the faint ticking of a clock, the whisper of my own breathing. Then I spoke. "I've seen the truth," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. "All of it." For a moment he froze. Then he opened his mouth, but no words came. My chest tightened as I pushed forward. I laid out everything, the documents, the hidden addresses, the unexplained transactions, the secret house. Every detail I had uncovered, every small clue, I told him. His face changed. The confidence I had known for years was gone. His lips trembled, eyes darting to the evidence, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. He stammered, trying to explain, but the excuses felt hollow, desperate. "I can explain, it's not what it looks like," he began, but I shook my head. Every word felt rehearsed, every gesture too calculated to be genuine. I thought about my grandchild. I thought about the whisper that had started all of this. "Grandpa, something's wrong with Dad." And I realized the truth wasn't just about betrayal, it was about protecting the family that still mattered, the part of my daughter that lived on. The room was tense. Every second stretched endlessly, like a rope being pulled tighter and tighter. And then, just as he tried to regain composure, I placed the final piece of evidence in front of him, the document that proved everything. His eyes widened. His shoulders slumped. I could see the realization settle in. There was no denying it. The trust, the money, the years of belief in him, it had been misplaced. And the worst part? He had no idea how justice would unfold because I was the one holding the pen. And in that moment, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The confrontation was over, but the weight of betrayal didn't lift entirely. It lingered in the room, in my chest, and in the quiet corners of my mind. The room was quiet after the confrontation. He sat there, slumped in his chair, staring at the documents as if they were a foreign language. I could feel the tension still hanging in the air, thick and suffocating like smoke that wouldn't clear. My chest ached. not just from anger but from the sorrow of knowing how deep the betrayal had gone. I thought about my grandchild. The whisper that had started all of this now felt like a lifeline, a small voice that had guided me through fear and uncertainty. "Grandpa, something's wrong with Dad." They had been right all along. And realizing that filled me with a mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief that I had discovered the truth before it went any further, heartbreak at the thought of how much trust had been broken. He finally spoke, his voice small, almost pleading. I never wanted anyone to find out like this." His words were hollow, weighed down by guilt. But I knew the damage wasn't just about secrecy, it was about the choices he had made over the years, the trust he had taken for granted, and the family he had left in doubt. I stood there, feeling the full impact of what had happened. Every lie, every hidden gesture, every secret act had led to this point. And yet, some part of me still struggled with what justice should look like. Do I punish? Do I forgive? Or do I simply step away, letting the weight of the truth teach the lesson in its own time? For a long moment, I just watched him, noticing the subtle signs of remorse. The slump of his shoulders, the trembling of his hands, the way his gaze avoided mine. And somewhere deep down, I realized that some consequences didn't need my hand to enforce them, they would find their own way. But even as I walked away from that room, the tension didn't fully leave me. I knew that some secrets would follow him forever, and some would haunt me too. The experience had changed me. It had changed my view of trust, of family, and of the fragile line between belief and betrayal. And yet, there was one comforting thought I clung to. The tiny voice that had whispered 7 years ago had been right all along, and it had saved the family I still had. The days after the confrontation were quiet, almost eerily so. He kept his distance, and I kept my eyes open, carefully observing every interaction, every message, every gesture. The tension hadn't disappeared, it had simply transformed. Now it was a quiet reminder, a shadow over what had once seemed ordinary. I thought often about my grandchild. Their voice, years ago, had sparked a journey that revealed a hidden world I could never have imagined. It amazed me that a small whisper, a tiny warning, had held so much power. That one voice had guided me through deception, fear, and doubt, and had ultimately safeguarded the family I loved. Some betrayals leave invisible scars. Some truths are far too heavy for anyone to carry alone. And yet, I also realized that justice doesn't always need to be loud or vengeful. Sometimes, the truth itself is enough, and the knowledge that you acted, that you uncovered, that you protected, is a quiet, enduring power. Even now, months later, I still catch myself thinking about that hidden house, the letters, the secrets. But I also remember the relief that I had faced the truth, the relief that my grandchild was safe, and the relief that a small voice had been heard. The story isn't neat. There's no perfect ending, no sweeping resolution that erases the past. Some consequences follow people forever. Some lessons linger. But in the end, the tiny voice that whispered 7 years ago had saved us all. And as I close this chapter, I know one thing. Vigilance, awareness, and listening, even to the smallest warnings, can make the difference between devastation and protection, between betrayal and trust. I thought about my grandchild. The whisper that had started all of this now felt like a lifeline, a small voice that had guided me through fear and uncertainty. Grandpa, something's wrong with Dad. They had been right all along. And realizing that filled me with a mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief that I had discovered the truth before it went any further, heartbreak at the thought of how much trust had been broken. He finally spoke, his voice small, almost pleading. I never wanted anyone to find out like this. His words were hollow, weighed down by guilt. But I knew the damage wasn't just about secrecy, it was about the choices he had made over the years, the trust he had taken for granted, and the family he had left in doubt. I stood there, feeling the full impact of what had happened. Every lie, every hidden gesture, every secret act had led to this point. And yet, some part of me still struggled with what justice should look like. Do I punish? Do I forgive? Or do I simply step away, letting the weight of the truth teach the lesson in its own time? For a long moment, I just watched him, noticing the subtle signs of remorse. The slump of his shoulders, the trembling of his hands, the way his gaze avoided mine. And somewhere deep down, I realized that some consequences didn't need my hand to enforce them, they would find their own way. But even as I walked away from that room, the tension didn't fully leave me. I knew that some secrets would follow him forever, and some would haunt me too. The experience had changed me. It had changed my view of trust, of family, and of the fragile line between belief and betrayal. And yet, there was one comforting thought I clung to. The tiny voice that had whispered 7 years ago had been right all along, and it had saved the family I still had. The days after the confrontation were quiet, almost eerily so. He kept his distance, and I kept my eyes open, carefully observing every interaction, every message, every gesture. The tension hadn't disappeared, it had simply transformed. Now it was a quiet reminder, a shadow over what had once seemed ordinary. I thought often about my grandchild. Their voice, years ago, had sparked a journey that revealed a hidden world I could never have imagined. It amazed me that a small whisper, a tiny warning, had held so much power. That one voice had guided me through deception, fear, and doubt, and had ultimately safeguarded the family I loved. Some betrayals leave invisible scars. Some truths are far too heavy for anyone to carry alone. And yet, I also realized that justice doesn't always need to be loud or vengeful. Sometimes, the truth itself is enough, and the knowledge that you acted, that you uncovered, that you protected, is a quiet, enduring power. Even now, months later, I still catch myself thinking about that hidden house, the letters, the secrets. But I also remember the relief that I had faced the truth, the relief that my grandchild was safe, and the relief that a small voice had been heard. The story isn't neat. There's no perfect ending, no sweeping resolution that erases the past. Some consequences follow people forever. Some lessons linger. But in the end, the tiny voice that whispered 7 years ago had saved us all. And as I close this chapter, I know one thing. Vigilance, awareness, and listening, even to the smallest warnings, can make the difference between devastation and protection, between betrayal and trust.